All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. I'm showing 6 o'clock, so we may have coming in a little bit late. We shall see. There are copies of the budget back there on that stool in the back. If you did not pick one up, you can take a moment to walk back there and grab one so that you can follow along as we go. And we will follow, we're just going to walk down the budget item by item. If there are not questions, we won't spend a lot of time focusing on it, but thank you for being here tonight for this annual budget presentation. Those who are here and anybody who be watching on the live stream, appreciate you sharing as we look a little bit back at what God has done, but really more focusing on what we anticipate and what we desire to see God do, which is dependent upon obviously the partnership that we share in terms of our commitment to work together, to serve together, and to give together. A budget is always nothing more than a plan. It is an anticipation, a desire, hopefully an expectation, but, like this year we didn't quite meet budget, so we'll drop a little bit. It fluctuates. It's always kind of a moving target because you try to plan out for a year, but you never know exactly what's going to come in, and you adjust as you need to on the road. So if you have questions, we will try to remember after each major section to stop and see if there's a question, or if you have a question. Sometimes with the light shining down, we cannot see a hand. So if you had a question, you want us to go back to something, then maybe saying something. If we're looking down or looking at the lights and cannot see you, we're not trying to not let you ask a question. We just haven't quite seen you, if that is the case. David has a microphone so that if you have a question, if you would wait, let him get a chance to get to you. The purpose for that is so that we have, for those who are watching the live stream, obviously they can't see or hear you, they're just seeing and hearing us. So that allows the question to be heard, and perhaps you don't hear a question that's asked over here, so it gives opportunity for everyone who's participating to be on the same page in terms of questions that might be asked. All right, well, let me lead us in a word of prayer, and then we will dive in and get started. Father, we are thankful that you are our provider. You are a God of graciousness and provision. You have given everything to us in Christ, the salvation that we have by your grace, by your love. And you have called us to be part of your body, your church, to share together, to love together, to serve together, and to give sacrificially, to support the work of the ministry that you are doing here, and the work of ministry that you are doing through us in our community and through our mission outreach engagements locally and around the world. Help us, Father, to recognize that all good things come from you. As we shared this morning, every good and perfect gift comes from you, comes down from you, a God of constancy and certainty. Help us to strive to be faithful, though we will never match your faithfulness. God, you have called us yet to be faithful and sacrificial and share. Now, thank you for those who are here, those who have invested for long periods of time, or perhaps some for shorter, but you have called them here, and they have followed you faithfully and give to you lovingly, and just pray that you would use all of our efforts together to focus upon what you've called us to do. Give us your vision, your clarity, and may we serve faithfully, is my prayer in the name of Christ. Amen. All right, before we look at the budget itself, I'd like to just kind of take some just broad brushstrokes of where we are at this point, what we have done over the past year. We're not going to look at comparisons in each category of this year compared to last year, but we will look at some basic reviews on what we have done thus far. So if you can bring that next slide up there. This may be hard for you to read. I'll try to read out what is there. The first line is the third quarter, middle is the second, the first quarter is at the bottom. The green or light green color is the receipts that have come in. The blue are the expenses, what we've actually spent. And then the black line is the budget. Now it's the same, we just divided by 3 or by 4, and that's what that number is. That stays the same from quarter to quarter. But what comes in and what goes out varies. So that you'll see in the first quarter, which is again the bottom, we took in $192,000, spent $191,000 roughly, so about $1,400 more that we took in than we spent. But a good bit short of what budget was, by about $9,000 or so dollars. The middle section, which is the quarter that's over the summer, and that tends to be the summer, the people are traveling. We don't have as much faithfulness in the giving because people are not here. We see definitely a moving of the lines, the second and third line there. Our giving was $190,000, and our expenditures in the summer, expenses are up and giving is down, so those two kind of work against each other. In the summer, $198,000, so the deficit in actual expenditures for the summer quarter was $8,300. But then in the third quarter, which is the last quarter of the year, October, November, December, tends to be on average the larger giving portion of the year. 27-28% of our giving receipts tend to come in that quarter, especially in December, sometimes in November, but especially in December. So that we had giving $203,500 compared to the giving in the previous quarter of $189, so that's a pretty good jump. Expenditures of $196, so our income over expenses of $7,300. So overarching, it was pretty much an even wash. I think we're about $500 short giving compared to spending. But notice overall, that black line that never moves, except for the third quarter, we don't really ever get close to that line in terms of what our budget plan was. We always are going to reflect, generally speaking, giving and spending are going to have to be kind of tied close together. Now, we do have designated categories in the designated accounts, money that's given for a specific purpose, benevolence dollars that are set aside, or scholarships for camp. So we can expend more in the summer because there are some designated reserves to draw on, but generally speaking, big picture, you're not going to be able to spend more than you're taking in. Certainly not in the long term. You need to have those lines kind of parallel in some way. So the budget plan we didn't meet, and that has led us to make some changes for this year. All right, a different picture, just collapsing all those numbers together in the next slide, shows where we are through January. Now, if you, February's not been a good month, just historically. A lot of money comes in December, and then January and February we're kind of catching up from a bunch of giving and the year-end giving for tax purposes. And then March-ish or so is when giving starts to pick back up to more normal levels. This year we had a great February, for which I'm abundantly thankful, because we have been running so far behind in terms of our budget deficit. But as of the end of January, which is when we put these numbers together, we had the budget of $690,000, receipts $642,000. That's a $48,000 gap between anticipated and actual. Now notice again expenses, $642,500. So those are going to, generally we're going to stay pretty close within those two. But the budget is a good bit higher than that. So our proposed budget for the coming fiscal year, which is April 1st, no fooling, through March 31st. So we have not quite a full month left of the fiscal year at this point. That is a budget of $774,684. A little bit of rounding, but pretty much there's a little bit on the decimal point, but not a lot. That is a $40,000, $41,000 roughly, drop budget plan from last year. We're running $48,000 short, so we're reducing budget to reflect that. 5% decrease percentage-wise, but note, and you maybe can't read that line, it depends on how good your vision is. What we have done to help us reach that budget drop, two things that we have done. There are a couple of categories, honestly, where we have budgeted more than we thought we would probably spend, like in the debt reduction, the loan. The percentage rate has been so far low. We have a fluctuating, a variable interest rate on our loan, has a basement and a ceiling, but we've been in the basement for I don't even know how many years because the interest rates have been so low. But you have to budget based on what if worst thing happens and that interest rate jumps up to the top. So you have to budget to cover what that payment would be at its highest. but it hasn't been that for some time. So that has always been higher than we've actually required spending for the note. Now, asterisk, any dollars that have come in, extra giving towards the loan, is always applied to additional principal. What we do out of the budget is what the note payment requirement is, that is taken out of budget. Anything that is additional that comes in that some of you have continued to give faithfully to help reduce the principal, which means we're paying less interest in the long run, every month that is sent, regardless of what the interest rate is, that full amount is always applied to additional principal. But there are other categories that we've had, and we've just kept in the budget because I wanted to and hoped that we would be able to do an international mission trip again. It's just not happened in several years, but we had money in the missions account for a international mission trip that we haven't been taking in some time. So some of that we've removed, so that has reduced down. But also we have some money that has been designated, in particular student ministry, a smaller degree towards like music or youth children's ministry. The money that has been designated and has to be used for that designated purpose. So some of our expenditures for mission trip and youth events are going to be expended through the designated dollars that have been spent rather than through the budget. So those numbers have dropped, but we're still going to anticipate spending the same. It's just we're spending it at different places. Instead of all through the budget plan, some is budget, some is designated, so that we can use those designated dollars. But those two together has allowed us to be able to reach that drop of $40,000, $41,000 without having to, and honestly I had anticipated and kind of planned that we would need to do some salary reductions. But the Personnel Committee, the Finance Committee worked hard. Our long night budget meeting was really a long night budget meeting this time. We finally had to stop at 10, I think. So 6 to 10. It was a pretty long meeting. Working hard and moving around, and we can draw this from here. We haven't been spending here, so we can drop this down to get us closer to what that deficit was without having to make any salary reductions for this year. So thankful to those who have allowed us to be able to do that. Now, the flip side of that is we've not been able to allow for any budget increases, salary increases. We always are, in a perfect world, we would always be able to increase money payments for our staff, but in the budget time that we are in, we just really have to be careful on that. But we did not have any reductions at all. Even insurance, I thought we'd have to do some changes there, but we've been able to keep all of that the same. Okay, so moving into the first section of the budget. Any question on that big picture? The local and global missions ministries. Two of those accounts, the first two, cooperative program and the DBA, are percentages of the total. So that number always changes and fluctuates based on, number one, what your budget plan is, but even then, what actually comes in is what the 1.25 or 4.5% are taken from. So we didn't meet that budget plan, so we didn't give that much. But when we reduce the budget down, obviously percentage of a smaller amount is going to be a smaller number. So the number's a little bit smaller, but this coming year, now this does not include Lottie Moon or Annie Armstrong or Gladys Moore or Mary Hill Davis, any of our special mission offerings. We are going to be expending $55,400 in global mission ministries. That includes cooperative program, DBA, local missions, our mission trips, which last year and this year combined, youth and students and church-wide, and then outreach and evangelism. Some categories that we dropped: mission conference, because we haven't done that honestly in about 7 years. So we found, and it hasn't been funded, it's just been the line item and a zero, so we finally dropped that out. We didn't drop it, but we didn't fund benevolence, which is only like $1,200. It wasn't a lot, but that's another one that we have money that's been designated in a designated account. So we're still spending, obviously, in benevolence, but we're going to anticipate spending those through the reserve rather than having some in the budget, which wasn't a large number anyway. The others did not change. With North Lake mission trips, the international trip that was there previously we're not including, so that number dropped a little bit. Youth mission trip dropped a lot, but we're spending a lot of that as a designated, so it'll be the same amount, just from a different pile. So the total there, $55,000, as I mentioned previously. Any question on the mission ministries. That's all put together in one number, but you have on the budget sheet what the breakdown of each of those categories is. There'd be a lot of slides if I did them individually, so we dropped them all together in one picture. The North Lake Missionaries, in case you did not know, the $5,400, the 3 mission families that we support each month. My previous student minister, A.J. Holly, the Dyes, who are former members, and her mom and father are still members here, and then the Salufos up in the Michigan area. So those 3 families, I think they receive the same each month. We send out money to support each of those, in addition to the money through the cooperative program, which funds the International Mission Board, North American Mission Board primarily. Those are individual families that we support. Okay, no questions on missions. All right, the next 2 sections are Sarah. Music is Sarah and Andrew, but would you go ahead and let her do that, because Andrew's doing 2 other categories. So I have slides here if you need them, or you can just look at those.
Right, thank you. Okay, we'll start with the music ministry and go into that next slide. Music and supplies covers individual anthems of music. If we buy something new for the choir, we haven't done that in some time, but it's a possibility. And then just other supplies we need for the music ministry throughout the year. What you see more often or see the results of is on the next slide, and that's the special presentations. We're attempting, when the budget allows, or I should say when giving allows, we purchase 1 new musical a year. So in any given year, we will do 1 musical we've already done and a new one. So this year, Christmas was a repeat, and Easter is new. Next year, we'll flip-flop to build our library of Christmas, Easter, Christmas, Easter. If you are aware of music publishing, all of our major music publishers have gone away since COVID. Not one. Lifeway Music, Word and Choral Club, nothing survived. There's 1 new publishing company that's kind of rising up. That's from which we got our Easter music. There are also churches, multiple churches, who have contacted the Singing Men of Texas, who are not having adult choirs anymore and giving away a lot of their literature. And my dad is real faithful to send me those emails. So we have some opportunities to get resources from other places that are giving rid of them. So that's a wonderful thing. And we will sure take advantage of that anytime that we can. The next chunk of the music ministry is for music equipment. There is more through designated, and that $1,000 plus what designated, meaning somebody has given a specific gift for music equipment, will likely go, unless something else breaks down first that we're not aware of. Our soundboard is whatever is a few steps past its last leg. Is that fair, Brian? Yes. And so obviously our hope is to replace it before we just come in one Sunday and it doesn't work. And so that $1,000 plus that which has been designated will likely, unless something else happens, go to replacing the soundboard. That brings the total for music ministry to $3,441. Any questions about the music ministry budget? All right, then let's move on to kiddos. In the children's ministry, we have our children's events, which is $3,400. A big chunk of this is the Fall Family Festival. Most of that budgeted money is hot dogs and supplies like that. Obviously, candy, y'all donate. Games, we haven't needed to. Every once in a while, we replace something that is broken, but the bulk of that is for food, and if we're able to rent either farm animals or the big extra inflatable, or both, or those types of things. Also inside of children's events is preteen camp, and like John alluded to, we did not have to put as much in for preteen camp because there are still some designated funds in another area that allow for scholarships for our kiddos to go. Sabine Creek Ranch, where we have gone the last few years, has been sold and undergone changes that make it not the place for us anymore. And so we are going back to Mount Lebanon this year for preteen camp. And in a wonderful turn of events in the hand of the Lord, when we were going to Sabine Creek Ranch, it was owned by the Walker family phenomenal family of God. We loved it so much. They sold it. We thought to go into retirement. Anyway, the director of preteen camp at Mount Lebanon, or the director of Mount Lebanon, I should say, retired. And who did they bring in? Mr. Walker, that owned the camp that we loved. So we will still get to worship alongside that family, but at Mount Lebanon. So that's our plan this year. Going to the next slide. VBS there is, I'm so grateful to serve alongside of you in a church that values VBS. You know, people in the community send their kids before they'll come themselves. They're more likely to send their kids to us than they are to show up themselves. And our community knows that our VBS is safe and is of value, is done well. And that's because of y'all, and I'm so grateful. This year it is awesome. It is Spark Studios. It is all about seeing the Lord's work through the creative arts. It's going to be really fun. And how the children are created to do good works through him. It's going to be awesome. The next slide there is preschool and children's supplies. That's $2,000. You see, if you can see the picture in the background, that's the resource room. That's a good visual picture of what we use there. That's your construction paper and scissors and everything else that it takes to do children's ministry, as well as snacks for our preschoolers, which are a little more costly right now, as we have been intentionally buying individually packaged things since COVID, and there's just a little more cost to that. All right, and the last slide there is our Bible study literature. It has changed a little bit just because the cost of our two curriculums goes up. In preschool, we use Think Orange curriculum, and upstairs we use a Lifeway, 1st through 5th grade, we use a Lifeway product that takes the kids through the Bible chronologically every 3 years. So in the children's ministry, if we went 1st through 6th grade, we go 1st through 5th. But if we went 1st through 6th, they'd get it twice, but our middle school is different. So they get it 1 2/3 times while they're in the children's ministry, which brings the children's ministry total, as you'll see on the next slide, to $10,330. Any questions about the children's ministry budget? All right. Oh, no.
Andrew's going to come down and share on youth events, and notice that the total is much less, but that's because a lot has been specifically designated for student ministries. That's talking about spending out of designated.
Yes, and I was going to explain a little more about that because we have been able to tap into that designated fund for different events. I think a great example of how we've used the designated budget, or a reduced budget, if you will, is the youth mission trip. This past youth mission trip, we combined with the family as well, and the students, even with that, not using even remotely very much of that budget, but with what we brought in as a family, we're able to do an event just about every night. We went to a water park, we went to bowling alley, we did all these different things, so the youth were not impacted in any way, or in a sense robbed of anything that they could do. Even I would say with this designated fund, and because of I'm a firm believer of having 2 events a month, and not one of them could be paid, one of them could be at a home or up here as well. And I think with the timing of the 2 events a month, it gives time to people to budget, but also being able to pick an event that is not overly priced as well. And when we have done that before, even during the pandemic times, the students were able to more than well enough cover. Maybe us as a church would cover about maybe $5 to $10 a student. But the students themselves or the parents would bring in the money that paid for the event. We were able to go to Striking Room. We were able to go to different places and be able to do all the everythings. There wasn't ever something that the students couldn't do, because I could never ever tell them well, we just don't have the money for that. That we were able to do that. And even if something was a little more expensive, which we haven't done yet because of the place that we choose and the things that they like to do, we could tap into that designated fund. So there wouldn't be something that they would be robbed of at all. And another great example of this is this coming week, where we have spring break events. We're doing events here as well, but we're also going to see a movie, and you just asked for $10 for that, and that covers for that movie and different things that we're going to do. And so when you have the ideas of being creative of what kind of events, but also budgeting and putting out far in advance of maybe a more expensive event, there's never going to be a time where I feel like that we're going to be robbed of anything. Now, if we ever get to a place where we're doing events 3 or 4 times a month, not only would that be a lot of money, and I think my parents would hate me. So it'd be like, hey, you need to calm down. But with that type of frequency of getting something excited about, but letting, I guess, in a sense, the excitement build again and budgeting well for those things, there hasn't been anything that I have felt where I've ever needed to go to John or to anybody and say, hey, I feel like we're being robbed of that or anything. Does anybody have any questions about that, or does that make sense? It does. All right. Well, let's go through the youth events. So you see that drop, but as I said, there's that designated fund for that, and we'll continue to use that if needed. But with that cycle of events and waiting in between, there's plenty of money for that. The next slide, you see the COVE in college and career. We reduced that a little, but there is $350 for them to continue to renovate the room and any events, or maybe to help cover some food for that. And I know that they could bring and help some money with that as well. So $350 for that. And then we can go ahead and go to the last slide as well, and then we can have questions at the end if anybody has them. And then we have Bible study literature. I've been writing some Bible study on Sunday morning, but I've also been looking at purchasing some literature, and the $275 would be more than enough to cover literature for an extended period of time for a Sunday school session, for Sunday school for 6 weeks, or even longer than that as well. So does anybody have any questions about the COVE, their Bible study, or even back to the youth events? Well, all right. And you see in total is $2,725. And that asterisk, I think, is there because talking about the designated fund or salary. Yeah, well, yeah.
It's just showing that your salary is not included in the $2,700.
Right. Yeah, salary is not included. Gotcha. Yeah. Yes, I see that now. It's kind of hard to
it is
see
small.
that.
Looking there, it's small print. You can see it up
Yeah.
here a little bit better. All right. The next section, adult ministries. A couple of items in there. The senior adults, we really, they haven't utilized this, but there are funds in the budget that they can, if they need to help scholarship someone for a trip that they might take or an activity, that allowance is in the budget. That's $200 for senior adult activities, which have been a little bit less with COVID, but started to do a few things. The next slide, women's and men's ministries, which right now, because we're not doing a Sunday afternoon Bible studies, as we've kind of done them off and on through the years, right now the annual dinners in January, typically in January, included in that. The ladies' retreat is part of that. Now some of this participants pay, but it's just to help augment a little bit what we charge people for participation. And then recently we've had several events, games nights that we've had up here at church. So those types of things are what we will do within the men's and women's ministry budget. There are also some designated funds in the account for those. Adult education is our primary Sunday school literature and other open windows and stuff that goes along with that. That is $5,300. I think it's a little bit dropped from last year. Not a tremendous amount, but just in terms of the number of things that we've needed. Some of the stuff has gone more online, digital, rather than print. A lot of it is still print, but some of it has moved to online resources. The next category, really just the total of that category, $6,650 for those adult ministries that you see in particular totaled out. A few drops, but honestly not significant drops in those categories. The next one I have before I call Andrew back up to look at facilities and support, the maintaining of the building, is the debt reduction. I had alluded to this a moment ago. In previous budgets, it's been, I think, $120,000, which is the high side when we originally went into the note of what the required payment would be, which we've not been anywhere near that for quite some time. So we are reducing that amount down for a couple reasons. We're not spending that much, and even raising interest rates, we're still not going to reach that $120,000 threshold for the year. Also, because we realize, and we've shared this, it's not a secret. In fact, we're having another meeting after this meeting tonight with that group committee, the roof evaluation team. We know that we're going to be looking at doing some major roof work on several of our buildings and that's not something that we're going to be able to do out of pocket, so we're going to be looking at refinancing. Unless someone wants to write a check for $600,000, $700,000, and borrowing some additional funds to do the work that needs to be done, and then refinancing that for a longer term. So the payments, we're hoping to keep the payments about the same. Until we know exactly what buildings we're going to do and get those estimates in and then go to the bank, we're not going to know what that amount is. We may need to look at borrowing, but we know that we're going to probably at some point, you're not voting to approve anything on that. That would come from that committee and then the finance committee, and we would discuss it, and then we would vote on it when that time comes. This is just kind of a reminder that we're going to have to change that at some point anyway, so it made sense for now. Let's just go ahead and drop that to more what we know that we're spending to help us reach that reduction amount that we need to have. And just reminder again, I know I like to repeat, and sometimes you get tired of listening. Any dollars that come in designated for principal reduction, the full amount goes to principal reduction. It's not part of the minimum payment that we make. That's always over and above. So anything you give, you know is going to be used for that purpose. All right, any question on just those couple of sections together? I don't like to reduce what we're paying on the note either, but with the gap and deficit, we just realize that we're going to have to make some cutbacks there to meet the needs where we are right now.
All right, we'll look at the facilities and support. Some of these mostly stay the same, and some have to be increased because I don't know if you noticed, there's a lot of inflation. We could probably have a therapy session for how much we've all spent on gas recently. Yeah, I know it's been high for me too, even with my little car. So, but let's go through these together. The facilities supports electricity, water, and gas, $58,500. So we need those, obviously, self-explanatory to keep this building running. For telephone, for $5,000. For new, that's incorporated in there. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So we've been able to get some new telephone system, but with that, we've been able to drop some of the price with that. So they've been already beneficial and helped so much. They were pretty dated, and so that has been a blessing. Property insurance, which is also explanatory of why we need that, $33,155, and being able to pay Russell. The next slide is $26,200. Oh, for Jenny. Oh, yes. And Jenny, we have Jenny who comes in and helps with Russell, and she is such a blessing and does things. Russell does so many things, but even he needs help every once in a while. And so we are very, very happy for her. Then also for custodial supplies, $3,600. And then building maintenance is, going to have to increase some, so to $73,000. Then obviously that comes with that equipment repairs, $1,250, and then new equipment we've designated for $1,200, and then transportation, helping with the bus when needed and if needed, is $3,000, and then so the total cost for all that is $204,905. So, any questions about those? I feel like it's all pretty straightforward.
There was a sizable increase, and if you've been tracking this, the building maintenance costs over the last several years have gone up. As the building ages, it costs more to maintain it. And that's just the reality of having to replace some things and repair some things. So that did increase a lot and has been increasing, but the alternative is, what is the alternative? We have to keep the building updated and keep it going. All right. The next section, I'm going to skip down to the general administrative and do that first and then come back to the salaries last. It's just how, for some reason, that's how I had it set up. Probably because the last tends to be where more of the questions are. But the last section, general administrative, what is included in that? Educational supplies and training, $1,100. That is our annual appreciation or annual training. And we sometimes we have somebody come in that we share from the BGT typically with our Sunday school teachers. Sometimes we've just had an appreciation dinner for all of our teachers, those who are serving and stepping back, those who are new, all of them included in that with their spouses. This past year is the first time we've actually gone off-site, at least since I've been here, gone off-site. We went to a community barbecue in Saxe, and everybody enjoyed that. But that is what the educational supplies and training is utilized for. The pulpit supply is when I'm gone, essentially, is what that is used to cover. Now, sometimes if it's people within the church, they are gracious in donating their time, but if we're asking someone to come in from outside, we'll typically give them some kind of honorarium. This is a notable increase over last year. It's twice what it was last year, I believe. The reason being is that my sabbatical is coming up. Planning to take, unless something unexpected arrives, in August. I will take that month off for some sabbatical training and just recharging. And obviously there's going to be 4 Sundays where somebody's going to be here in a row that were not just part of the vacation Sundays that we typically do over the course of the year. Our executive director at the DBA, Ryan Jesperson, has agreed to come in, and I very much appreciate him being willing to do all 4 Sundays rather than having somebody different come in each week. He's been gracious enough to volunteer to do that. So anticipate that coming up in August. The next sections, I put 2 on this slide, the media library and flowers. When we don't have somebody who designates flowers for in memorial or in honor of someone, oftentimes we will do flowers, or more so when there's a funeral, we will provide some kind of a display spray for that family. Media library is for the software for our library. That's generally it's all spent at one time for our renewal. Don't remember what time in the year that comes, but I think it's earlier in our budget year when that happens. Fellowship expenses is the next category, $6,100. This is a good drop from last year, but last year we had our last budget year, our 45th anniversary celebration. So we're going to have a less need. And really that was based looking at what we actually spent, so we were able to drop that down some. Our office administration category and the copier lease together, $23,700. That's a lot, but there's a lot of stuff that we do in the office, all the supplies that we use there. She mentioned the resource room for all the children's ministry activities. This is for everything that happens in here, all the copies that we make. So we pay for any color copy that we make on our copier, not colored paper, but colored ink on pages. That's why you have to have a special code, and we don't necessarily tell you what that is. Only some people have that access to that ability. But every colored page is like 9 or 10 cents. So we try to do black and white, which is much less. But we also have an amount we pay for the lease for the copier itself each month. So both of those are included in that amount. Stewardship supplies is not really a large number, $900. This is, yes, the envelopes you see in the pew, but also the envelopes that you get mailed to you if you are a member. That is not a lot of money, and studies have shown, research has shown that it can be an encouragement, a reminder to people to give. If anybody begins to give regularly because they receive stewardship envelopes in the mail, it's more than paid for what the budget cost is for sending it out to everybody. If, however, you are one of those individuals or families that now give online and you don't have a need for the envelopes, we can always remove you from that list, but you have to tell us so that we can contact them. Unless somebody's told us they don't want, now don't tell me here, I'm not one who calls them, but you can contact the office if you'd like to be removed, because if you're not using them, that's fine. But the reason we send that out is that it is a benefit to us to have that resource available. Postage has certainly dropped over the years. I remember it being $3,500, $4,000 over the course of a year. My postage is going up, but the number of things that we do through the mail has decreased. There's a lot more electronic communication that we are utilizing. Our computer support and website support, $3,000. This is when we need to replace or repair one of our desktop units or laptop. We did just last year, I believe, bought a new church laptop, maybe the year before, relatively recently, because it was the one we had was a donation, and it was definitely time to replace it. But also the website hosting, to have our website up. and any website repair. And we did have last year, we went through a major rebuild of the website. It was off and on and down and up. We had to rebuild it code-wide. Well, we hired somebody to rebuild that. So there are costs that come associated with having to keep that up. But it's really not a lot. Considering all the units that we have, all the individual desktops, it's really not a large number. The total for that category, general administrative group together, is about $40,000, a little under that. Any question on any of the line items in that section? I always kind of wonder if I'm going too fast, but when there's no questions, I don't want to belabor it either. So if you have a question, please let it be known. Then going back up to the salaries and benefits section, which is that main one in the middle. There are 3 ministerial salaries that make up that $164,000. And this, myself, Sarah, and Andrew. That is exactly the same as it was last year. So we anticipated that there would be, but we did not need to make a change there. So that is as it was before. The next line item is our ministry assistants, and there are also 3 of those. Now, at this point, I don't think any of them are full-time. Cindy still? No, I think they're all part-time. Originally there were 2 of them were full-time, but they've just kind of moved and we've shifted responsibilities around a little bit. But 3 of them are, the total for the 3 of them, $68,700. Again, no change from the previous year. The next one, the custodian salary, there's 1 custodian. This is where Russell's. It's really about the same that we pay for the service for Jenny coming in. But 1 is through our building support, where we just pay a set amount each month. When it's under the salaries, we have payroll taxes that we're responsible for. We have retirement that we're responsible for. So there's other elements that are associated with that. It would cost us more if we had 2 full-time custodians, because Russell is, I guess he's full-time. He's 85, and he can outwork all of us here, and he knows everything here. You need to get him to teach you some of these things here. We need that knowledge in another brain. His brain is good, but we would be in trouble if something were to happen to Russell, because there's a lot of things we just don't know how to do. That is also no change in the salary. The temporary part-time salaries, what is that comprised of? That is primarily we have a little bit of a stipend for our SKA director. It comes out of that. Most of that is really they are self-sustaining, and their salaries is based on the dollars that come in from enrollment fees and payments by parents. Also, our instrumentalists, really, which is just 2, our drummer that we pay, and then our pianist that we have budget allotment for. We're not currently paying a pianist. Now, Deanna had retired, but has graciously agreed to kind of come back. So we are looking, and Sarah has been looking very hard and looking under every rock. It's harder to find a pianist than it used to be. It is really a struggle, and she's tried we have something we think will work out, but then it doesn't end up working out. So Tracy's playing, my wife's playing a couple Sundays, Deanna's playing a couple Sundays and helping with choir, even though she's retired, because we just don't have somebody in that, and it's a benefit to have someone in that. That was also when we were reduced part of what had been set aside for pianists, because that position is not filled. And we're trying to, rather than what we had this year where the budget plan is here, but we're really only spending this amount, where we don't think we're going to actually spend, we pull back a little bit to make those numbers match up a little bit more. If we do find the Lord brings the next pianist, we're going to have to revisit that, and that amount will have to increase, because that's not enough to pay a pianist. But there's just not really anything on the horizon that we have to think that that's going to be filled, so we were able to pull that number back down. The total of all those together is about $11,000, $10,800. So, ministry expense category is for the 3 ministerial staff members. That allows us to be able to have memberships in organizations, to buy resources to help in our ministry, to take people out to lunch. Last year I went to the National BGCT or SBC meeting in Nashville, and also to the BGCT state meeting in Galveston. So those are funds to allow us to do those types of things. This also is not changed from last year, $5,250. Love gifts and bonuses. This is on the anniversary of each person's employment here. There is an amount that is given. It's determined by a formula that was long ago set up by the church based on how many years that you've been here and whether you're ministerial or support. So on your anniversary, you have a check that you receive, but also there's money to give Christmas bonuses. Both of those determined by a formula that has been set up. So we just follow that pattern. But that was a slight increase just because every 5 years that it goes up a level, and we had one staff member who went up the next level, so like $50 difference. Not a lot difference from last year. The employment payroll taxes, about $21,000. Mostly the same. That's sometimes just it's an educated guess, but it is a guess. Like with some of our part-time salaries, we're not really sure how many hours they're going to work. Sometimes they work less, sometimes they work more, and that's going to impact the payroll taxes. So it's a kind of somewhat of a moving number, but this is more in line with what we anticipate that we're going to spend for this year. So it changed slightly, but about really the same. Retirement for all of our full-time ministerial staff members, there's a retirement amount that is set aside. So Russell, and then the three of us, and that was no change because it's tied to a percentage of your salary, and the salaries didn't change, so that number didn't change. Health insurance, I'm sure it will surprise you to hear that that did not go down. No, it doesn't surprise you. However, it didn't go up just a whole lot. It only went up $1,000 for 3 people's health insurance full-time members. That's pretty good. And we have health insurance, and then there's dental insurance that's available that they can have. So really, I thought that was pretty good. Last year it was a much greater increase than this year, so we're thankful for that. About $25,000 for the insurance altogether. All right, so the personnel budget total, all of those I've mentioned together, $343,698. And that is the largest chunk of our budget. The second largest chunk of our budget is our building maintenance costs. And then after that, the debt reduction, which will change at some point next year, will change, or this year will change. So again, the proposed budget amount is $775,000 roughly. Requirement each week that we would need to have to meet that goal is just under $15,000. Again, it's a 5% drop over last year's budget, which was about $815,000. So that is the total amount that we are aiming for, that we are anticipating. And we got a little bit, lazy is not the right word, but we were short of budget, but we knew we weren't going to spend it because we knew we had that play in some of those categories that we weren't going to spend it all. That is no longer the case. We've cut back in those areas where it was budgeted more than we were going to spend. So we are on the line. So we need to get, without having to make changes at some point in the budget, that amount is what we need to have, $14,900 per week. It's going to vary from week to week, but the total of $775,000. All right, it's a lot of information. I know it's somewhat drinking out of a fire hydrant, but we always want to make sure that we provide you the information, so there's never a thought that something's somehow being hidden or slipping under the radar. So if you have a question on anything in the budget, you can talk with myself. If you have a question about personnel, you can talk with personnel or the finance committee, one of those other categories, or just talk with the staff. We will have one additional time for discussion. If there is discussion later this month on a Wednesday night, but honestly, it's been probably 5 or 6 years since we've had really anybody who's come and asked questions, which is fine. Maybe this, giving a lot of information, we've answered the questions before you've asked them, but we want to at least give that opportunity to you, and then we will vote to adopt this budget. And when we do that, and this is the way we've always done it, it's not a change, we vote to adopt or not to adopt. It's not amendable at that point. Any questions we need to address prior to that. All right. Oh, a very talkative bunch tonight. Is it because David was the one that was going to have a microphone and you didn't want to have him say something? Is that why there are no questions? Probably it. Neva. Oh, yeah, sorry. You thought you were going to get away with it.
There she is. Well, you told me if no one asked a question, I could sing a song, so Neva blew that up.
Thank you, Neva, for asking a question.
I'm just curious, is SKA fully independent now? Are we not supporting them?
There's a little bit in the budget, not a lot, $1,500, $1,800 that is used to augment what the SKA director's salary is, but most of that is the salaries is based on what the income is. Now, I say that, but yes, we've been short a few times, and when we were short, yes, now it's great to hear that. The February is a good month all around. I think December was the same way, where we were more coming in than going out. So we don't budget it per se, but when they are short, when they're in the red, obviously we're going to have to step in and make up that amount. But we've had a couple of good months, so that is good. So no, but yes. Anything else? No singing and tap dancing back there, David. All right. Oh, that's right. Yes, we have. You want to get the dog to bark on cue? We have a service dog in training that is here. You want to say hi to him. He's an excitable. He's fun. I love dogs, by the way. I think that's probably a true statement. That we know about. You would figure that Brandon would know. Yeah. Okay. Just because there wasn't really another category, I guess we could put it under the adult ministries. I think because they meet in the youth center, I think that's just where we put it. Okay. That has been, the amount has been higher, but it hasn't been spent like 2 or 3 years. That's another one why we've reduced down. If there is something that the COVE wants to do, this can cost a little bit more than that. Maybe that's something where there's some designated funds that we could use to augment what the budget amount is.
Well, actually, my question is, it talks about curriculum separately. Is that just youth curriculum, or does the curriculum include for the COVE class?
I think the COVE class is done through, which is interesting. You don't do the students.
We did order curriculum recently, so that's why. Is there no budget line item for?
It's just on the into the adult. It would be expensed there if you need it. So if certainly you have a desire to use something, that's what that account is there for.
I just want to make sure we had something.
It does probably make sense to move that from student ministries over under adult ministries. It's just been there and we haven't moved it. Okay. Because you have one section that's here and one section that's here. Is interesting. Yeah. But please, if y'all want to use the curriculum that the adults are using or a different curriculum, we certainly want to make that available to you. Mr. Jim.
John, under facility and support, we got janitorial service, $26,000, and then under salary and benefits, we've got custodian salaries, $26,000. Mm-hmm. How does those intertwine?
The one under facilities and support, that $26,200 is a service that we employ to bring Jenny, who is Russell's assistant, in. It's tech clean services. We pay a set amount each month. They cover salary, insurance, retirement, all that. We just pay one amount. Russell's salary, because he is an employee of the church, not just a contract that we do through another business, is under the salaries and benefits because we pay him, we do the payroll tax, and we do retirement for him. So that's why we separate these two out. The one under facilities and support is a third-party contractor. That it saves us in the long run, honestly, to do it that way. We used to have two custodians that we paid salary when Robert was still alive, Russell's brother, Dan's uncle, who was, I think, the original custodian. Russell came after he did. Robert and his wife, Joanna, was, when I got here, I think she had retired by the time I got here because Russell was already working. But they were originally in, and then Russell came in, worked with Robert for a number of years before Robert retired and ultimately passed away. But yeah, that's why those are in two separate categories. All right, any other questions? If you have, it's not like we say amen and you can't ask a question. If you have another question, something comes up, just contact the office. We'll be glad to. We don't want you to have anything you don't know if you want to know the answer to it. Everything is open if you have a desire to know. Except about the vacation house in Aspen. We keep that one under the radar. Dan. Yes, sir. Hang on, let David get over here with the mic. For those who may be live streaming in, we want to make sure that they hear the question.
Back at the beginning, there's a line item, outreach and evangelism.
Yes.
What exactly does that cover?
Outreach, and it might be more, anything we did that's an evangelistic outreach would be under there. It's more probably advertising type stuff, banners, when we buy banners. Some of the stuff we purchase coffee-wise that's community, that we share in community with people in the church and people outside the church. Mailers that we do out to people, inviting them to something. Now we've done some evangelistic outreach type things when we had the fishing event that came in years ago, but we don't have one in there. That title hasn't gotten changed. It's just been what the title has been for a long time. But it's essentially advertising the church and community. All right. There are no other questions. We're not voting on anything. We're not in a business meeting. It's just presentation of information. We will vote on it later in the month. All right. If there are no questions, and I will close this in a word of prayer. Thank you for those of you who joined us online on the live stream. If you have questions, you can contact the office. We'll be glad to dialogue with you about that. Let me close this in prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Father God, we are thankful for your blessings, for your love, for your provision. Though we may not have met the budget plan that we had last year, God, you led us to do what you desired for us to do. And Father, I pray that we would continue to be faithful, that we would continue to be sacrificial, that we would move forward into the new year with a sense of excitement of what you're going to do in our midst. And Father, that we would be found faithful. Whatever it is that you've called us to do, whatever part we may have to play, let us be found faithful, because you, God, are a faithful God. And we give you praise in advance in the name of Christ. Amen. Now have a good week. Thank you. And don't forget, the roof committee, we will meet in the conference room in just a few moments.